Hey, what's going on everybody? Benji Kaiser here today talking about the 2018 MacBook Pro. Are MacBook Pros still relevant for graphic design? So I've talked a lot about computers for graphic designers on this channel, and I've given you some of the best of the computers that I recommend, some budget computers, and if you're interested in those videos, you can check those out in the YouTube cards above or the description below. That'll just give you a general idea on what the best computer is to become a graphic designer, or if you're already a graphic designer. But today we're talking about specifically the MacBook Pro. I've mentioned some concerns in the past, and I just want to fully address the computer to maybe mention some things that you haven't thought of, some things I really like about the MacBook Pro, to give you some perspective. That way, when you're going to buy a computer for graphic design, you are fully equipped with the knowledge you need to make a qualified decision. All right, now let's jump into the content, but before we do, if you've yet to subscribe to this channel, I highly recommend doing so. I put out videos for the graphic design industry, helping you with tech, tools, and tips to make sure you have all the information you need. The first thing I want to talk about with the MacBook Pro is the build quality. This is something that drew me to the Mac products from a very young age. I got my first MacBook when I was 12 years old. I had the white unibody, and it was fantastic. I felt like finally somebody understood what I needed in a computer. It was well built, it was simple, the screen resolution was fantastic, the operating system was flawless. I just really enjoyed using the computer, and it's something I hadn't experienced from a Windows product in the past. And I'm sure that's why a lot of you are still buying Mac products, because the OS is truly incredible. But I do have a few concerns about the build of the MacBook Pro. There's only Thunderbolt ports on the computer. So for me as a graphic designer, and if you are a graphic designer, chances are you're gonna have thumb drives, SD cards, you're gonna use HDMI cables to hook into screens to maybe do presentations. There's some things you should really think about when buying a computer. Does it have all the options and all the ports you need? Now, they do make dongles for the MacBook Pro that you can plug in, and you can have USB slots and SD cards and HDMI and all that, but that becomes cumbersome. So that's just one thing I really want you to think about when you're considering getting a computer. The computer is very well built, but they have slimmed it down to make the computer smaller, which is great, it looks really good, but it's taken away options from you. Something to go along with that thought is that they've made their computers lighter and thinner, which is great for travel. If you're somebody who's constantly on the road, if you're going to and from class multiple times per day, it helps to have a nice light computer that you can throw in your bag and it doesn't take up a lot of room or a lot of weight. That's definitely a bonus. But then again, those ports are not there, which makes it a little cumbersome when you're always pulling out your dongle. Mac has always been a leader at innovation with screen quality. They brought out their Retina to screen a handful of years ago now, and they were the leader in screen resolution for a good while. Now Windows is coming out with the 4K screens, and I personally have a 4K screen on my Dell XPS 15, and it is fantastic. But the Mac still holds a great screen, has RGB color, so when you're working on your computer as a graphic designer, you can guarantee you're gonna have good color quality. So another thing I want to mention that I think is very important that you may have not considered is the performance of the MacBook Pro. Compared to most computers on the market at a price level, it is not as well equipped. So the MacBook Pro comes with an i7 7th generation processor. This processor actually came out in 2016, so it's technically a 2-year-old processor. The latest computers that are about the equivalent price range of a MacBook Pro have either the i7 8th generation or the i7 9th generation processor. So if you do buy a MacBook Pro, know that the processor is not going to be up to par. So if you do buy a MacBook Pro, know that the processor is not going to be up to par as other computers at the same price level. If you're a graphic designer, you might want to consider, will you be doing motion graphics? Will you be doing video editing? Will you be working with multiple layers in Photoshop? If you are, the graphics processing unit in the MacBook Pro is again not as powerful as many of the equivalent priced computers on the market. So the MacBook Pro uses a Radeon 555 graphics processing unit. Benchmarked against the GTX 1050, pretty standard graphics processing unit on most computers at the equivalent price range, outpaces the Radeon in the MacBook Pro by over 50% on every benchmark test. So know that that as well is not as powerful as most computers on the market and for the price range. The last thing we're going to look at as far as the performance is the RAM. The MacBook Pro comes with 16 gigs of RAM, and while this is plenty of RAM for a graphic designer, you have to consider if you would ever want to upgrade that RAM. For me, I do a lot of video editing, so having more RAM helps me to work in Premiere Pro while designing a thumbnail in InDesign and editing a photo in Photoshop while also uploading a video to YouTube. I've done that and it's run the computer very well with 32 gigs of RAM. If you would want to do that, if you would want to upgrade your MacBook Pro from 16 gigs of RAM to 32 gigs of RAM, you would be unable to. The new MacBook Pros have soldered all of their components into the motherboard of the computer, which makes it uncustomizable by you, the consumer. And so that's something you really want to think about. If you ever want to switch out the battery, if you ever want to switch out the hard drive, the RAM, you cannot do that in the new MacBook Pros. I want to say that I have enjoyed my Mac products in the past, but as I'm moving towards video editing, as I'm moving towards more digital design, I need more power from my computer in a graphics processing standpoint, in a RAM standpoint, and even in the standard computer processor, the brain of the computer. And so for me personally, Mac does not fit my needs. But if you don't see yourself doing the things I just listed, then a MacBook Pro will be a great computer for you as a graphic designer. If you love the operating system, if you love the ecosystem of Apple, then definitely pick a MacBook Pro. It is a well-equipped computer for graphic design. Now, if you're curious about my top recommendations for graphic design computers, like I said earlier, you can check those out in the YouTube cards above or the description below. And if you use the link below this video and buy a MacBook Pro or another computer, that will give me a small commission. It is no extra cost to you, but it does help out this channel, which I am extremely grateful for. Anyway, I'm Benji Kaiser of BenjiKaiser.com. I hope this has given you a fresh perspective on, is the MacBook Pro still relevant for graphic design? And I will see you here on the next episode.